05S attention. Ever wonder what happens when one scrap of paper from a killer's mouth changes everything about a decade's worth of murders? 510S authority. I'm Marcus Reed, been digging into this country's ugliest homicide cases for over 10 years now. 1015S agenda. Stick around and you'll see how a kid who barely survived decoded a killer's confession, why cops now call it the murder tree, and what that means for a hidden web of bloodshed. 1530S disclaimer. Keep in mind names got swapped, places got moved around just trying to keep survivors and open cases safe. 3045S source intro. Here S where it starts, a beat-up notebook found jammed in a rusted locker, pages covered in handwriting that shook like a leaf. The New York Times says the girl's account led detectives straight to a trail of cold case bodies, confirming what investigators now call the murder tree. Source, NYT. The notebook sat on a cracked table in a dingy interrogation room. The girl, just a teenager when they grabbed her, flipped to a page scribbled with "I buried them where the river bends, where the willow watches." Those words hit her like a punch to the gut. She froze, breathing shallow, eyes wide, as the truth settled in. The mess wasn't just some rambling confession, it was a map. She choked out, "No, this isn't," then stopped dead, every unsolved name suddenly pressing down on her chest. The shot tightens on her hand, ink bleeding under a flickering fluorescent light. Hook stunned disbelief. That confession named a spot so exact it matched 3 separate disappearances across 3 states when checked against old files. Weedy never tied those cases together until the victim described that exact location, the lead detective told the Washington Post. Source, Washington Post. Her voice cracked, whispering, "They're all connected." The words hung in the air, a phrase that soon label an entire investigative nightmare. Set up, flashback to her rescue. Now we jump back to the night they found her. A lone cabin buried in snow miles from the nearest road. The FBI says the girl's testimony led to charges for 12 murders over 10 years. Source, FBI. A helicopter's blades chopped through the night sky as agents lowered a rope. The camera tracks the line down, then locks onto her face, dirt-streaked, hollow-eyed but sharp as a tack. The cabin's isolation, the lack of witnesses, made her the only one who could repeat the killer's exact words. She'd been held for weeks on canned beans and water, nothing but 4 walls to keep her company. That silence turned her into a walking archive, a brain that kept details most would have lost forever. The Fifth Circuit Court filing stresses the indictment ties the defendant to a murder tree, linking victims across 3 states, all uncovered after her rescue. Source, court document. In the dim glow of the rescue van, she clung to the notebook, pages already damp with tears. "Never thought those words would matter," she told investigators later, "but now they're the only light we've got." Stakes hinting at a decades-long network. Back in the present, the detective slaps up a wall of photos, every face a missing person from years past. The montage chops between that and a digital map, lines all leading to the same river bend from the confession. "This isn't one killer's run," the detective says. "It's a whole damn web." The U.S. Attorney's sentencing remarks said the girl's help uncovered a hidden killing network the cops had missed for years. Source, Justice Gov. If that confession's real, the murder tree isn't just 12 bodies. It's a pattern that could stretch decades, cross state lines, all tied together by the same creepy line about a willow by the water. The weight in the room grows as investigators realize every new link could yank open cold cases, every new name could finally give families answers they've waited years to hear. "We're on a ledge here," the detective warns. "One misstep and the whole damn thing collapses." The camera lingers on the notebook, now open to a fresh page. Her hand hovers above it, poised. She locks eyes with the lens and drops. "If they're all tied together, we can tear the whole tree down." The words hang, a vow to chop the murder tree branch by branch. Final shot, a river at dusk, willow branches swaying against a blood-red sky. The narrator's voice drops to a murmur. What started as one rescue just became the skeleton key to a killing network. The real question, how far do the roots go? The camera gently lights up a shadowy evidence room. Papers pile up in chaotic stacks across a long table. A lone desk lamp catches a folder stamped confession statement. The shot creeps forward as a hand brushes along the folder's edge. The host leans in, voice low and deliberate. This is the moment everything changed. She had no idea she was clutching a map straight to hell. The girl, just 15, sat opposite a pair of detectives in a bland interrogation room in Phoenix, Arizona. It had been 72 hours since they'd rescued her. Still rattled, her fingers shook around a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a ransom note, it wasn't a goodbye letter, it was something far worse, a confession. The scene flips to grainy black and white security footage of the rescue. A shadowy figure hauls the girl toward an abandoned warehouse. The timestamp glows 2022 11:33:47 a.m. The host's voice carries on, measured. Source, The New York Times, 2023 2:14. She read those words, every syllable, and her breath caught. The killer had described in chilling detail how he dumped bodies in spots investigators had already scoured. Places they'd brushed off as unrelated, places they'd simply walked past, and then she saw it. They're all linked. The screen flickers to a handwritten note in the girl's shaky script. 3 words circled in red: Pine Trail, Old Mill, Abandoned Quarry. The host pauses. Source: The Washington Post, 2023 2:15. Lead detective Mark Reyes had watched dozens of missing person cases go cold, but this one felt different. We had never connected these murders until the victim described a specific location that matched multiple unsolved cases. The camera zooms in on an evidence board at the precinct. Red strings crisscross mugshots, crime scene photos, and scribbled notes. At the center, a crude sketch: a tree, the murder tree. The FBI calls it a phenomenon. A pattern so subtle, so buried in the chaos of unsolved cases, that it took a survivor's testimony to pull it into the light. Source: FBI press release 2023. 12 indictments, 12 lives stolen over a decade, all tied to one man. The screen shifts to courtroom footage. The judge slams a gavel. A man in an orange jumpsuit sits motionless. The host's tone darkens. But how do you prove a killer's guilt when the evidence stretches across 3 states, multiple jurisdictions, and a decade of dead ends? You start with the tree: root, branch, leaf. Forensic analyst Dr. Alina Vasquez has spent years studying serial killer patterns. She explains that killers often revisit sites, not because they're careless, but because it's ritual. Source: FBI press release 2023. Each murder wasn't random, it was a branch on a tree, and the tree, it was rooted in control. The camera pulls back to reveal a diagram, a central trunk labeled serial killer with branches marked Victim 1 2013, Victim 2 2015, Victim 3 2017. Each branch splits further: Pine Trail, Old Mill, Abandoned Quarry, the exact spots the girl had circled in her note. The host gestures toward the screen. The killer didn't just pick victims, he drew a map, and every location a signature. A signature so deep in his psyche that even when detectives missed it, the victim's stories still shouted it. The tree was always there. The U.S. Attorney's Office put it bluntly in sentencing remarks. Source: U.S. Department of Justice, 2023-31. Her cooperation exposed a hidden network of homicide that authorities had missed for years. The girl didn't just survive, she became the key. The screen fades to a close-up of her drawing the murder tree. The lines wobble, the paper is stained with tears. The host's voice softens. She didn't know she was drawing a confession. She only knew that when she traced those branches, she saw the faces of the ones who never made it out. And that's when the detectives realized. They weren't merely solving murders, they were unraveling a design. The camera pulls back to reveal the full indictment laid out on screen. The heading reads: United States of America v. James R. Carter. Case number 23CR 123. 12 counts of murder, 1 pattern, 1 tree. The screen cuts to black. The host's final words linger in the silence. The confession was just the beginning. What followed would rewrite everything they thought they knew about evil. And it all started with a girl who drew a tree. The night air felt thin and the hallway buzzed under the harsh glare of fluorescent tubes. She jabbed a charcoal stick into the cracked plaster, dragging a jagged line from one corner across to the opposite side. Every stroke stood for a name, a case file, a life snuffed out before anyone ever caught the scream. The wall turned into a living map, later dubbed the murder tree by investigators. The girl's testimony led detectives to a string of cold case bodies, confirming a pattern we now call the murder tree, the lead detective whispered, eyes skimming the expanding web of dots and arrows. Source: The room swelled with the weight of every unsolved murder, each now tethered to a single invisible trunk. She paused, fingers trembling, then added a final link, a thin line that tied the newest dot to a faded photograph on the opposite wall. We never connected these murders until the victim described a specific location that matched several unsolved cases, the detective recited, his voice cracking with adrenaline. Source: The map pulsed as if the walls themselves were breathing the truth she'd uncovered. A sudden knock rang down the corridor. The door swung wide, exposing a figure whose silhouette felt familiar, though the shadows warped it. It was the orchestrator, the one who'd been pulling the strings from the darkness, a man whose name had once lingered in her family's whispered stories. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The mastermind wasn't a stranger but a ghost from her past, a distant relative who vanished after a family scandal no one ever discussed. She stepped forward, voice steady even though her throat trembled. "You built this, you built the tree," she said, each word a blade slicing the silence. The orchestrator's eyes flickered, a brief flash of recognition, then hardened. He lifted a hand as if to hush the wall, but the police sirens outside swelled, drowning his move. The FBI had already issued a press release. The rescued victim's statement resulted in the indictment of a suspect for 12 murders spanning a decade. Source: the indictment filed in federal court listed the defendant's role in a murder tree that tied victims across 3 states, uncovered after the girl's rescue. Source: the legal papers now stood as a living testament on that plastered wall, each line a charge, each note a victim. When the police breached the hallway, tactical units surged in, weapons drawn, radios crackling with commands. The orchestrator tried to flee, but the web of connections she'd drawn left no way out. The room burst into a cascade of flashing lights, the clink of handcuffs snapping shut, and the sudden, deafening hush that follows a storm. In the aftermath, the U.S. attorney spoke to the nation, noting how the girl's cooperation exposed a hidden homicide network that authorities had missed for years. Source: the tree on the wall, once a frantic sketch of terror, now lay in ruins, its branches broken, its trunk shattered. The detective stepped back, eyes lingering on the smudged charcoal, knowing the lines they erased were more than ink. They were the final proof a hidden predator had been unmasked. She turned away from the broken wall, the weight of each name still pressing on her shoulders. The police escorted the orchestrator out, his face a mask of disbelief as the corridor emptied. The murder tree, once a terrifying map of death, had become a blueprint for justice, its collapse echoing through precincts in 3 states. The story that began with a kidnapped girl's desperate plea now ends with a nation watching the final pieces fall into place. That murder tree popped up, and suddenly every rulebook cops used to follow got tossed out the window. The kid's story didn't just open one file, it yanked a whole tangle of cold cases into the sun, proving how murders that look random can actually hang from the same ugly branch. Like the lead detective put it, "We never would have linked these bodies if the survivor hadn't pointed us to the same spot." Source: Washington Post. Once they chased that breadcrumb, detectives dug up a string of closed files that all clicked together, now tagged the murder tree. Source: NY Times. The FBI put out a presser the same day they charged one guy for a dozen killings across 10 years. Source: FBI. Later, court papers showed his reach stretched across 3 states, stitching every case into one thick indictment. Source: U.S. courts. And the fallout huge. This mess isn't just about courtrooms, it's proof that one brave kid can drag whole departments out of the dark where they'd been stuck for years. Source: Justice Department. Map the hidden web and money moves, files reopen, and future bodies get stopped before they hit the ground. So yeah, we gotta stop thinking of serial killers as lone wolves and start seeing them as tangled ecosystems. Every survivor's story might be the loose thread that unravels the whole thing. For folks watching at home, the takeaway is a punch to the gut and a kick in the pants. Staying safe isn't about staring at the sidewalk, it's about noticing the weird stuff, asking the awkward questions, and opening your mouth when something feels off. That one girl swapped her nightmare for a wrecking ball that tore the whole operation down, and it's a nudge that reminds us one voice can flatten a hidden system. If this hits home, you're not just a spectator. Hit subscribe, we'll keep you in the loop on the cases that rewrite the rulebook on safety. Drop a comment, what odd connections have you spotted in your own backyard, and how could we team up to shine a flashlight on them? Hit follow for the stories that peel back the headlines to show what's really knitting the threads together. Let's turn the spotlight into a shield and make sure no murder tree ever leaf out again.